This, you might not believe me, but I actually cross-referenced 5 top tips of pitching from at least 100 investors. Natalie can attest to that because we did it last year for the Skill Builder. What are their 5 top tips? So what these actually are distilled from 100 requests out to, so actually they've put together and cross-referenced each of their responses, and we've come up with 5. So doing your research is absolutely essential. What's your unique concept? What's so great about it? What makes it stand out from the crowd? Be passionate, like we were just saying. Love and live your property. Know it inside out, back to front. Keep it simple, keep it brief, and don't forget your P's and Q's. So if we go into the next slides, and I'll be saying later that Andrew and Natalie have their top tips as well. So let's see if they coincide, hopefully. So pitching preparation, this is like getting down to the nitty gritty. You've done all your groundwork, you know who you're pitching to, you know what you've got, you know your concept feels right. It's time to prep the actual pitch itself. Wherever it is, however long it is, make sure you create different lengths of pitching. You don't know what kind of opportunities you're going to get. Your call could be taken up with technical issues, conversations about other things. You might have 2 minutes at the end or 30 seconds. You just have to be able to adapt and be really flexible. So make pitches, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, write them out, practice, and then turn the tables. Your pitchee will want to know probably 3 things. What's your idea? What's it about? How will you pull it off? And why would you be doing it and not somebody else? I think it's really important. So have you covered the basics? Concept, characters, design, world of story, done. It really doesn't need to be very complicated, although it's very difficult to get to distill ideas and get down to the DNA of your property. Have you got it in a nutshell? Can you do an elevator pitch? That's 60 seconds to 2 minutes. It's not as easy as it seems. And even people who have been in the business a long time are not the best pitchers. It's a real art form. I think it's very important to remember that. Be prepared, don't wing it, don't improvise, use notes, make a presentation if it's easier, walk through your pitch Bible, but don't read it, like we were saying earlier. Your meeting should be conversational, and nothing is more tedious for a buyer than being read to. So don't tell them. So this is like about saying, I'm a really amazing writer or creator. Just say you've got published work, you've done this or that, show it, don't tell. It's really, really important. And especially if you're meeting for the first time, don't oversell yourself. You don't need to. You know, if they like you, they like your project, that's all you need. And practice. Just practice as much as you can. And by practicing, you'll also be able to identify the areas where your pitch drags, gets confusing, or simply just fails to sell your concept. Find a group of friends, family, or colleagues that might be willing to give you some constructive criticism, if you can take it, and realize that if they can't follow your pitch, it's highly unlikely an executive will be able to either. Know your audience, and your audience in this case, know who you're addressing your pitch to. It's an important part of the pitching process. You need to get your recipient right, preferably. If you're pitching at a market event such as Kidscreen, it's highly likely this is the right person to be talking to. But don't worry if it's just one of the team. The whole team has to love you and your project. So and you've really got to start somewhere. Know about the company you're addressing your pitch to. Once again, if you're pitching to a network or broadcaster, know what else they have on air, check the schedules, and be ready for comments like, this reminds me of Dora, Bob's, whatever. You should know your shows. And have your counter arguments ready if your show is different from these or your feature, and avoid at all costs saying that yours is better because. A little humility goes a long way. We've talked about publishing, don't oversell, hit your target points, concept, character, story, that's it. Anything more than that, then you're likely overselling your idea and boring your audience. This is really important. Be respectful and always follow up. If it's a no, if you're told directly on the spot it's a no and you're dismissed, then leave. If it's a Zoom, then you have to leave as well. And follow up. It's a common courtesy. Don't ever forget to be nice to the assistant or the secretary or whoever set up the meeting. You never know who can get a promotion. I think that's all I have to say on those, unless you guys have anything to say. Mind you, your pitching tips are coming up a bit later, aren't they? Can we have a look at the next slide, which is about the Bible, pitch Bible, what goes into a pitch Bible? It's not written in stone by any stretch, but there are some key elements, and it can be extremely varied in length. it depends on networks and broadcasters like to see something quite short. I mean, I know the BBC, very few pages necessary, but they do need the key info. You know, they do need the concept. They need to know what it's about. They need some idea of characters, of writing, what it's going to look like. It is animation. So this is the tool to be used by you and your creative team as your pitching tool. Once on board the project, it will be essential for the distributor, sales agent, broadcaster. So it's something that expands with use and the different types of use for it. It can become actually quite a big tree, because the pitch Bible can be used as a base for a style guide when you're working with licensing, toy manufacturers, unless you have your licensing partners on board earlier. It's never set in stone, and as development progresses, things will change pending financing and partners. So I definitely suggest using taglines. Taglines work very well together. A key visual, think of your movie poster, captures the essence of the property. Then a short synopsis to set the scene. This is your pitch. This is your verbal pitch. If it's a feature, the treatment should be about 5 to 6 pages long. And a script for a feature is essential in an advanced version if you can. 2 or 3 scripts can be requested by investors for TV series. And I think it's about 5 to 7 storylines, storyboards, springboards, however you want to call those. Let me have a look if I've got any more comments on that. Your proposed cast and crew, Andrew touched on that earlier. Let me have a look if I have anything else to add. The estimated budget, not really essential. You might well get asked that question in a meeting. You don't have to put it in your Bible, but it's more than likely it will come up, especially if you get into further conversations. Natalie, Andrew, anything else to add on the pitch Bible?
Not really. I mean, I think it's just the most important thing is that there's not too much copy. It's not too copy heavy. You can expand, but it really just wants to be those kind of key takeaways for a broadcaster looking at it. Beautiful visuals, if you can, and some sample springboards for stories, I think is really critical, just so that they can get a sense of longevity and the sort of content that you're going to have on an episode-to-episode basis. And I think if you are pitching a preschool and there's a strong educational content, then it's important, if you can, to include a segment which talks to core values and themes, and even engage with an educational consultant or someone who can endorse what you're trying to sell in terms of the content push.
Absolutely.
I agree with all of that. The other thing to say is it's a pitch Bible, so it's not your series Bible. You don't have to go into exhaustive detail of every character and every scene and every possible combination. It's about getting them excited about the story world and the characters and the beautiful designs that you have, so that they go, great, we will read the scripts and we'll read the Bible, or we like what you're doing, let's look at the teaser. It's part of the pitch, but don't throw everything in. Try and keep it so that you can go through it and they're still in the room with you, and they haven't fallen asleep.
To write about too much text, too much copy, and also if you don't have an illustrator or designer, or you don't have your designs, and especially in case of features, I've seen a lot of mood boards and putting together different photos, something that evokes the atmosphere of the show or the feature. Even actors, photos of actors who you wish that your ideal cast and crew. I think it's kind of important. It's really important to have something visually. It's we are talking about animation, so if you don't have a designer on board, then to think about mood boards. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and also I've also seen particularly in live action, it works incredibly well, where they in a pitch they didn't have a teaser which was actual footage because they hadn't been financed, they couldn't make a teaser. But what they did is they cut together other live action films with a kind of unifying soundtrack, and it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, the one that I saw was actually Federation had done it for a live action drama series they were doing, and it was absolutely jaw-dropping, and it was all just clips from other shows, and you could actually spot some of them eventually, but when you were watching it at first, you were just sucked into it and went, wow, that looks like a great series, and only then did you realize that it was other films that they were combined with. So sometimes it's not about having spent huge amounts of money. It's just about, what is the series about? And I've also seen it done really well for animation, where for one pitch I saw, they'd cut together game footage, for example, and it was all about the style and the pacing and things, rather than having something that was exactly what you were going to produce eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Should we have a look at the P's and Q's and pitching, and then at Natalie's and Andrew's top tips? Okay, I am obsessed with this. But it's super important. Let's have a look. Basically, be polite. It's all about etiquette, and there's a lot of unwritten rules there. Try and avoid requesting meetings with broadcast investors who are not necessarily appropriate to your project. You don't want to waste their time. And when you do have something that's appropriate, you want them to be able to say, yes, let's do a meeting, instead of thinking, oh, there's that time waiting producer's always showing me the wrong project. That is totally inappropriate for my platform. As we said before, you can always start a call by asking investors what their current needs are, listen, absorb, translate, read between the lines, use that information for shaping your pitch. There's nothing worse for an investor than being pitched at by a robot. Platforms, have you done your homework on them? Do you know about their key themes, words, emblematic characters? Nickelodeon, for example, it comes up all the time. Heart, smart, and fart. We hear that all the time, but it's quite essential in knowing exactly what they're looking for and what they like. People who you're pitching to, something we call, are we speaking the same language? I think that's quite important, especially for the Brits, to remember, as certain things are taken for granted. The majority of your buyers, investors, are not going to be the English mother tongue speakers. They won't understand Englishisms. They don't understand slang. They won't understand a lot of pop cultural references, but they pretend they do because they don't want to look like idiots. So be very careful, speak clearly, articulate, and just try and just try and think about those things. It's Englishisms aren't universal as much as you may like to think they are. I have this complaint a lot from broadcasters, so that's why I'm putting that in. Forget about politics if you can avoid that, then, or if you can't, try and sit on the fence. Patience, tenacity. It takes years to do certain deals. It took me 2 years to do a deal with Ryan Italy. I mean, it just takes a long time. Sometimes you have to be extremely patient. You have to be very polite. A good way of catching up with broadcasters and platforms and investors, instead of saying, as per my previous 325 emails, think about things. How about you moving forward with your project? New writer, new designs, new this, the other. They might get the impression that the train is going to leave the station without them, and that's human nature, and they'll want to be on it. They'll want to know more about it. And I think it's really important to entice people instead of hammering them all the time with repeat emails and follow-up. Try not to text people too much, only if you're confirming a meeting or just a little thank you. Don't send lots of materials via LinkedIn. They're not appropriate platforms for that. Try using email. Some broadcasters get so many emails that writing to them on WhatsApp is actually quite effective, as long as you keep it short and sweet and to the point. Don't take anything for granted. If you don't know each other that well, then be careful with your language, especially when you're writing. And then good manners are, like most credit cards, are universally accepted and always appreciated. So always follow up, and always, even if the meeting was a disaster, and you never know, one day you may even joke about it together. What a disaster your meeting was. So unless Andrew and Natalie have anything to add to that, maybe we should go to Natalie's top tips.
Thanks, Justine. I mean, I think we've covered a few of them here, like do your homework and how much research, how important that is and how important it is for your pitch to be relevant. And we've also talked a little bit about the fact that it's a marathon and not a sprint. I mean, it takes years to get new content developed, produced, and distributed. So I think it is critical that you think long term and that you try and future-proof not just the property itself, but your relationships. So it's really important not just to meet someone once, send them a follow-up, and then go, okay, well, wait for them to come back to me. So, it is really important to check in with people regularly, and to kind of develop and nurture a relationship that then could be sustainable for the long term. And I think also, to that note, one of my other top tips would be, that content needs are constantly changing. So what one channel might want today, they may not want in 6 months' time from now. So it's important to check back. I mean, it's interesting that you had perseverance on your previous slide. I once had a broadcaster say that he thought that my middle name must be Tenacious. And that's because I'd had lots of no's. And I sometimes do say, look, no might not be a no, dead no. It might just be a not right now. So I think it's important. No one wants to flog a dead horse, so you need to know when to stop. But I think it's important, especially when you've got tentpole markets, that you go in with something fresh. But you could also say, do you remember that show that we talked about? Because suddenly their needs may have changed, and it might just be a top line reference. And then they're suddenly like, oh, actually, you know what? I do need that right now. And then your no becomes a yes. And that's something I've experienced in multiple occasions. So never give up. It might just be a not right now. And I think authenticity is paramount, thankfully, with everything that's happened in the last year. The policies that most broadcasters are now implementing, which is no diversity, no commission, is absolutely as it should be. And I think it counts not just for the on-screen content that you're portraying, but that actually it's authentically portrayed by both the voices, the writers, the production team. So it's both on screen and off screen. I think that's critical. Should have happened a long time ago, but thankfully we're in the right place moving forward now. And I think from my point of view, going back to when we were talking about co-production deals or different kind of business models, there are so many different sort of partnership models that you can have, whether that's a co-pro, whether it's an option, whether it's just an assignment of rights in terms of buyout, whether it's just a kind of initial buyout development deal that then evolves into more meaningful partnership further down the line. Be creative in the way that you carve out your financial models. There's no fast rule. They're all different, and you can get creative when it comes to finding finance for your development and then ultimately finding finance for that critical production budget as well. So get creative when it comes to the business side of things.
If you have that luxury to be able to do it. I'd love to know more about what you mean by creative, Natalie. But
well, I suppose, things like, for example, it might be that, you've got a level of development that you want to do. Say you've been able to fund your Bible and maybe a pilot episode script, but what you really, really need is a test, because that proof of concept sometimes can be that critical piece of the puzzle that tips a broadcaster into making a decision when they're so risk averse, because they can see it. But, it's not cheap to produce an animation test, certainly not in the CG space, because assets have to be built and they are a huge investment. So, for example, one of the deals that I might have done in the past is that I have done a small distribution grant for rights in a key territory or a couple of key territories or pan-regional. And the funds that distribution sales partner has advanced against those rights has then paid for the development that I need in order to make that animation test, so that then I can go with a much, much broader, more comprehensive package. And then I'm pitching rest of world, what that person over there is pitching to those territories with an incentive to recoup on their investment. So they're driven to help you. So you've got a two-pronged attack. You've covered your costs for development and you've still got rights on the table.
That is gold. Brilliant. Thank you. And Andrew, what about your top tips? Less.
Very much that location. It's all about the relationships. You have to get to know somebody before you're going to agree to work with them for the next 2 years. And if they're in another country and you're having to get up very early in the morning or work very late at night on a regular basis, and some of it is going to be wonderful and everything will be going fantastically, and occasionally it will go wrong and you have to fix it. You need that relationship to be in place. You both of you need to be in a position where you genuinely want to work together and you have that trust and that respect for each other. And then that gets you through the bad times and makes the good times even better. So it really is, you know, if someone turned up tomorrow and said, I've got this big pot of money and I want to produce a show with you, Andrew, the answer has to be no, because I don't know who you are. You know, do I really want to spend the next 2 to 5 years of my life speaking to you on a very regular basis without knowing who you are and where you're coming from? And so it is about those relationships. It's a long-term game. And you know, not every project is right for every partnership. It has to be the right people, the right project, the right time, the right structure. And so, you know, even if you're not going to work with a studio today, you know, get to know people at the markets, because there may come a project, you know, in a few years' time where they're just the right partner for you. And so relationships are the most important thing. Communication is equally important. These days, when you can't physically go to another country and sit in the studio and peer over their shoulder as they're doing the work, you're relying on emails and you're relying on Zoom calls. And so you have to communicate really well. You've got to be really clear. And all the things you talked about, Justine, about, you know, being respectful and polite and things, they really apply. You know, you're dealing with someone who's might have had a really bad day, they're working really hard, they've had to get up early or late to speak to you, even though you're up late as well. You know, you have to have good communication. You have to be able to trust what the other person is saying and be able to explain your concerns and find solutions. It's not just about banging the table and saying, fix it. It's about finding the solution that works for everyone. And that might mean some compromise, but that's what a co-production is all about. And lastly, that shared creative vision. Both of you have to know exactly what it is you're making and what kind of a show. And it's all the things you talked about in terms of pitching. You know, in the same way as a broadcaster has to understand, you know, what it is that you're doing, so does your co-producer. They have to really get what it is that you're trying to produce, what your target market is, what your audience is, what kind of humor it is. All of those key things are just as important for a co-production as they are to pitch to a broadcaster.
Fabulous. I'm glad we all agree on everything. Oof.
We've practiced this.
Almost. It was as if. I think we can go to the last slide now, and just to see if anybody has any questions about marketing thinking or pitching or anything on those, or Natalie.
One thing I would say is that, you know, pitching is scary, and it doesn't matter how many times you've done it. And believe me, I've been doing it for over 20 years. You are still going to get nervous. And it might be that it's just on a one-on-one. It might be because you're in a closed room with 20 execs from Disney. You know, it is a nervous thing, but ultimately we're just selling cartoons for kids. And I think, you know, you just have to just be passionate about it and know that these people in front of you are sitting there and they want to hear something that is gold, and then they go, oh my God, they can get excited about. And it might just be that that's your project. So don't overthink it. Just be super, super prepared for it, and just know that it's okay to get sweaty palms. It doesn't matter how long you've been in the game. It happens to the best of us.
There's a couple of questions on Pitch Bibles, actually, one from Edward and one from Harry. Can I present sample animation scene or trailer along with Pitch Bible? Absolutely. But if you've got limited bandwidth, bit tricky, you want your animation to look its best. So on a session like this today, showing animation would be a very bad idea, because it will be pixelated, it will drag, and it might start buffering. So I would do that if you're doing a one-to-one session, if you know you've got great internet, well, you can send it as a link, you know, to once you've done your meeting. Should you hand over a copy of your pitch Bible? You actually have physical pitch Bibles? Wow. Yeah, sure. You should be careful though. I think you generally would like to send them. You can send them as a PDF document. You're not giving away top secret information. You've already protected your IP, right? You've got your copyright, you've optioned your rights. So you should be fine. You shouldn't be precious about these things. If you're sharing financial information, maybe an NDA. NDAs are used universally and actually very reassuring for a lot of producers. So if you're asking people for budgets, or you're being asked for your budgets, finance plans, etc., then an NDA is a really great idea. I don't think there was anything else on the...
I think if you are going to share a physical copy, it's important to always follow up with a digital copy, because increasingly people don't necessarily want to load up their suitcase with extra weight. And the last thing you want to do is hand them this lovely glossy thing that's cost you a fortune to prepare, and they've left it in a hotel or they've left it on the plane. So either which way, give it to them if you've got it. And they may well take it back and it's there sitting on their desk and you're going to be front of mind because of that. But at the same time, just in case, always follow up with the email team.
It's a double-edged sword. I think that's pretty much it. We're way over time, apparently. And I believe that Tony from the DIT has a couple of things to say before we move on to our general Q&A, if everybody can hang around a bit longer if they have additional questions.
Yeah, thanks very much, Justine. That was brilliant. Just a couple of quick points with regard to practicalities with DIT. There's been lots of nice comments about people working with DIT, etc. But just to say, we sometimes get companies come direct to us looking for financing and direct financing into the business or into the project. That's not how it works. Primarily, most of the funding that's available goes through the trade partners like Animation UK, like CMC or PACT, who organise a lot of these delegations to the markets and festivals around the world. So that's the first, usually the first port of call in terms of getting support, which is financial support. And the other point I wanted to make, Andrew and I think everybody mentioned the word compromise earlier. That's just as important when knowing your audience, just as important when you're dealing with the regions, when you're dealing with other nations and what they do, particularly with China. I mean, I'm sure Natalie has seen this. You've got to know what you're bringing to the table as well as what they may be bringing to the table, as Andrew was mentioning earlier. Particularly with China, this is key, because if you can't bring your element to the table in that conversation, they can sometimes move very quickly. Whilst it may take a long time to put deals together and to actually make the shows and make the content, sometimes if you can't deliver what you're bringing to the table in terms of your part of the funding, they'll move on. And as Natalie was saying earlier, you know, you've got to find that match and you've got to make it. I know that there are some companies that have got commitment, say, from a Chinese company, but because they haven't been able to place their end of it early enough, the deal hasn't happened. So bear that in mind. And with regards to the regions, that there was reference about DIT, many countries around the world where we do have support, particularly in the creative industries and particularly in China, in the US, Latin America, the Middle East. We've got specific people working on creative industries in those areas. And there's two things that they can help with in terms of market intelligence, just general information, particularly IP in some cases, how those nations will work with regard to their IP. But also, I think it was Natalie and Andrew who were talking about know your partners. And so if you have to do that discreet inquiry, as Justine was saying, that's another thing that some of our staff around the world can do. They can pick up, speak on the phone in the local language, find out whether there's any nuance that we're missing or that we've taken something the wrong way from a language point of view. So that's a crucial aspect of what DIT in the regions can provide. In the toolkit that's coming, there's a very, very brief sort of presentation where there's a link to the main access to the government portal, and there's a few new initiatives coming up, like the Internationalization Fund, which can offer expertise, and the Export Academy, where there's additional support that can be in some cases where you might get some funding to actually help the business develop in certain ways, but that will probably apply to businesses of a certain size rather than newcomers to the industry. So that's all I had to say, apart from thanks to everybody and Animation UK and Kate and everybody for putting on a long but very, very valuable and fascinating afternoon. So thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I think it's just best to pass over to Kate straight away. Big thank you to Natalie and Andrew. You're amazing. And so good to have some support.
Thanks for having us.
Wow, I'm just going to quote Natalie. I hope I'm not on mute. You just want to hear something that is gold, I think you said, about Disney being in a room and expecting what was going to come. We have this afternoon heard so much gold dust, golden experience, and huge amounts of knowledge covering all of those topics. Justine, we did give you an impossible task, but you have managed to condense, you know, so much experience into 2 hours. It's been fantastic. I just want to say again, please don't worry, in the audience who have also been fantastic and stayed with us through an extended period. And it's hard to be on Zoom for 2 hours. It's really hard to concentrate. You've been with us all the way, and we're very grateful. But don't worry if you missed things, or you had to go and get a cup of tea, or you have to have dropped off in the middle. We will get the toolkit out, and we have recorded the session, so you can go back and see the bits you've missed. I just want to say the next big market for us is Annecy. It's already been talked about, and Animation UK will be organising a delegation, online delegation, to the Annecy event this year. So touch base with Animation UK for more information on that in the next few weeks. Please, please, please join the CMC conference, which you've heard all about this afternoon as well. And I'll give a plug to the Animation Ensemble on the Friday, I think it is, if I'm not giving away a date that isn't confirmed yet. Also, a huge request. You will get one of those lovely forms that asks for information about how you found the event in terms of information, accessibility, and so on. We want to hear from you, and we want really good, honest feedback. And we really want to know that we can come back and invite you to more events and target more information at you. So please, please do that. There are lots of questions that weren't answered, Amir and Tariq, and the film question. I've noted them. We'll try and get back to you directly if we have your details, and they're still outstanding questions. And some of those were about investment readiness, and we're planning to hold another session like this on investment readiness, private investment in company development. So again, please check out Animation UK, sign up and subscribe to our information. So without further ado, but with huge heartfelt thanks, I really want to add my thanks, personal thanks, and on behalf of the UK Screen Alliance, to our animation rock stars this afternoon. So Andrew, Natalie, Justine, and Tony. I know you had a huge amount to add, more to add, and we could have listened to you for longer. And hopefully we will, because we will be putting a lot of this information into that famous toolkit. So thank you so much. I want to give a big shout out to Lauren and Neil, who have been behind the scenes organising and making this all run smoothly. So thanks a million, guys. And mainly to the audience who've joined us today and who are going to give us feedback so we can do these sessions, more of them, and we'll pick up on any topics, because we could have spent 2 hours on any one of those topics for sure. Huge, huge thanks to Justine. Thank you so much for organising, delivering, distilling and presenting our first export session, and it will not be the last. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So we'll sign off now, and we'll see you all again, and please do get in touch. Thank you.